How's it going today? I'm just using my Surface. Wonder why that's doing that. It shows that I'm horizontal. All right. Now can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Sadly,
We were just speculating if you have your surface rotated sideways.
Upside down and leaning against my window.
is it seriously turned? We've been
That
like
was the
this to
fix.
poor Derek.
Yep. All I
That's
see
awesome.
is buckets boogers.
All right. So hello again, Mr. Puckett.
Hello, Mr. Barry. How are
We
you?
are back again for another fantastic episode of Cloud Simplified. Hopefully we'll woo our audiences with the cool trials and tribulations of what customers are doing with Azure.
You know, when you start off like that, that worries me. You set us up for failure. But I see Derek Martin's on, so
Yes. Yeah, thank you for joining today, Derek. Yeah,
My pleasure. My two favorite CSAs in the room.
Oh, look at that. You know, you go straight to the top, Derek, every
That's
time.
right. Yeah,
That's
right. Well, thanks for coming on and joining us on the show, Derek. And one of the things that I know I was talking with Matthew about earlier that kind of puts me to sleep very quickly is reading white papers on governance and strategy, and, all this other kind of boring-ish stuff. It's actually kind of important for customers to.
Well, this is why Ryan's deployments always look bad,
Yeah. So
It's one of those things that nobody ever likes to talk about,
Right.
but is incredibly, incredibly important.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm glad to have you on, talking a bit about that, and also to highlight, how you've addressed some of these challenges with customers, specifically using capabilities that are in Azure to be able to, streamline, enforce, and regulate what customers are doing within a subscription. It's not just specific to Azure. I think it's all too important in any cloud implementation that when you turn it into the wild, wild west and just let business groups and employees do whatever the heck they want, that things tend to get out of control. And I think it's important to think about that up front. So.
Yeah, when we look at what's happening with all of the data breaches of the last week,
Right.
Governance becomes a very important topic. It could be cost containment. It could be all these other operational excellence type things. But at the end of the day, I'm really tired of my stuff being dropped on an unsecured storage bucket. Just stop.
No.
Stop. So,
Yeah, actually, regarding that, I think I read an article. I'm trying to remember what outlet it was on earlier this week, where somebody had actually. I did. It was a company that does building securement. So badge entry and like biometrics to get into to buildings, and they had some database with 20 some odd million records in it that was sitting on Azure, or not an Azure storage. It was actually, I don't think the cloud provider was mentioned, on some publicly accessible storage, and there's some bad guys downloaded it. So it's now freely available on the dark web, as it were. So
some of them, I don't even think you have to go to the dark web to get it. It's like, oh, I'll just search for this, and there it is.
Did you see the DEF CON story where the guy, a researcher, had come away with I don't know how many different companies, but basically because people's defaults for not securing the secure storage endpoints correctly, when it was ridiculous, and then he just goes, all right, I'm going to release my code in a week. Can you imagine the fallout from that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hence,
so
hence the
these are why
importance.
governance things become important.
Okay, so yeah.
All right. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about? I don't know if you have. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, this is applicable to every customer, but I know that you've had successes in helping customers along this journey, and I'm kind of interested to hear some of the starting points, and then also what sorts of things are important from your point of view to pay attention to, things that they can do and customers can use in Azure to be able to make that easy and streamlined. Definitely interested to kind of hear a bit more about what you've been doing.
So the main message that I try to get across when I go talking with customers is that you're coming to Azure or to the cloud as you are. You're not going to change your entire organization overnight and go into the cloud shiny and clean.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about Azure and the tooling that we provide is that we allow you to come as you are and easily put some guardrails around your environment so that you don't end up being like some of these companies that it's just by default it should be secure. That doesn't mean that it's not relatively easy to unsecure it. And that's where operational excellence and governance comes into play to make sure that you're able to audit and monitor and control things. I had a couple of good examples that I was thinking about when you guys talked me into coming on the show.
We forced you. Remember?
Yeah.
There's going to be drinks involved at some point.
I need it.
Yeah, I was thinking about some of the examples of recent companies that I've been working with, and it really comes down to a couple of key pieces. The first one is identity has to be centralized. You have to have an identity store that is proven and reliable. Well, for 99.9% of all companies, that's Active Directory. The fewer moving parts are that get between that and what's happening in the cloud, the better. So yes, we do single sign-on. Yes, we will sync your Active Directory up to Azure, It is not the case any longer that an IT shop should go and look for the thing that happens to be in the top right-hand quadrant and, let's go buy that. Because all of a sudden you have 12 things hanging off of your identity apparatus. And who's in charge of what? The second piece is networking. Far too many companies, in fact, most companies, have gone and said our approach to securing our enterprise is by recording everything at the edge and assuming that the network is secure in that manner.
The moat principle.
Yeah, the moat principle.
Yeah.
Number one, that's like looking for a needle in a stack of needles in a stack of another set of needles. It just there are better ways of doing that.
I like the way you describe that. It's all too often, and it's easy for customers to snap to their default behavior. I mean, that's just what they're used to doing, and their co-location facilities that they used in the past or whatever. And things are different in the cloud. Maybe I shouldn't say different because they can do that, and clouds support that, but. If you want to incur some efficiencies and leverage the benefits of the cloud, this might not be the best approach.
Yeah, and I do tell my customers, listen, there are politics or financial purposes for going into the cloud. Nobody goes because yippee. I mean, there's reasons. And I want customers to come to the cloud as they are, and we're going to try our very best to make it secure by default. So if you want to bring your Palo Altos and record everything and put a moat around it, okay. But number one, you're not realizing a lot of the benefits of the cloud, and maybe you don't want to realize those benefits, whatever. But number two, you're not allowing it to provide you with the security apparatus that it comes with. And that approach just isn't valuable anymore. Securing the network in that manner, it doesn't work.
Right.
I like how you phrase that. You're not taking advantage of what it comes with. It's almost like, I just took away the user manual, threw it out the window, and said, I don't need all these screws and bolts and whatnot. I can still make it work.
Yeah. And it's not that I fault the companies for doing that. The companies that I work with, it's not that they don't know any better. It's that has just been I got to check the box for my compliance and the network is secure. Well, I promise you the network is not secure. You have been breached. You may not know it yet, but you have been breached.
Yeah. I mean, there's been some big retailers that were in the news, over the years that arguably, had PCI compliant, networking. These are companies that weren't using the cloud, and they were breached, with contractors that had access to things that there's lots of pathways and doors that when it comes to security and and putting some boundaries around that, I think, is important. And no argument there.
Piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the average timeline to when people finally figured out they were breached? It was like what, 200 and
almost a year.
Yeah, almost a year.
That brings me to my third piece: is the tooling from 10 years ago is not going to be able to keep up with a cloud cadence. I have been on the end of probably half a dozen in the last year crit sits within Microsoft. They're SEV cases like everybody stops what they're doing to help the customer. And we will always help the customer as best as we can, but these are customers that they're putting their toe into the cloud, and all of a sudden they turn on Azure Security Center and they're like, well, we just got breached. No, you were breached 4 years ago, and you're just now finding out about it because our machine learning stuff is really that good.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do we do now?
So do you bring drinks with that conversation? Or are you helping people just kind of drink that away real quickly?
Yeah, it's one of those things like, okay, this is a SEV, it's a breach case. Are they a new cloud customer? Yes. Let me get a beer.
Yeah.
Again, I don't fault these companies. These guys are doing their very best with the tooling that they have. But again, it goes back to that mindset of go find the top right-hand corner niche product that doesn't work with any other product and buy that. And it'll solve that one little problem. Microsoft has always had the approach of let's solve 90% of the problems and then beat the crap out of it for that last 10%.
Yeah.
Do you need that esoteric feature that only 5 companies on the planet really need? Do you really need that? If so, cool, but probably not. So let's leverage the tooling that's built to work together natively. So that's the third thing, and the fourth thing is really around if you don't have a governance strategy for on-premise that works well, applying that nothing to the cloud is probably not going to work real well. And so I get really passionate around things like just sprawl. Like, why would you set up the cloud in a way that makes perfect sense on-prem but may not make any sense at all in the cloud? And this gets into Azure-specific things around subscription management and policies and blueprints and all of this stuff. And I've come to the conclusion after beating my head against the wall with a number of customers that, look, you may think that you're really, really complicated, but at the end of the day, there is a right answer to how many subscriptions do you need? How many network endpoints do you need? How many management groups do you need? There is a right answer, unless you are like the top 2% of the world that literally is a multinational conglomerate where you're buying things in multiple currencies and da-da-da-da. The answer is 2. Start with 2 subscriptions. You don't need dozens of subscriptions, because every time you add an additional subscription, you add an additional entry point for the network. You add an additional entry point for the policies lining up. Is role-based access control lining up? Oh, you're applying contributor rights to the subscriptions. Don't do that. Everything has to be automated. Everything has to be, auditable. Yeah. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for a phenomenal implosion.
Yeah. So definitely, I think loud and clear, we're unanimously agreeing that that's important to set some of these guardrails up front. But what approaches would you take in the context of Azure? Like what would be step 1? You said 2. Well, maybe step 2. You said starting with reducing subscription sprawl, and then from there, what would be kind of a next logical step?
Determine, and I have a bias towards networking because I have a networking background, and so the step 2 for me is. So let me actually back up. Step 0 is have a plan. Step 1
Fair enough.
is apply that plan to limited sprawl with regard to your subscriptions. Step 3 is orient your network in a way that makes sense for your company, but is not grounded on data center, data center, data center, data center, data center, data center, like this old on-prem style.
Right.
You can serve Azure anywhere in the world and never leave the Microsoft network. Try that. Your egress points, your network egress points back to your on-prem data centers need to be few and far between, and they need to be redundant. VPN is not production, that kind of stuff. Yes,
Why?
to a gigabit on VPN now. It's so awesome, but you're still piping.
1.25 gigabit, actually. So 1.25
gigabit.
gigabit.
Ryan, you gotta keep them honest.
Forgot about that extra gigabit.
Yeah.
Gigabit.
1.2
whatever.
Gigawatts.
Yeah, gigawatts. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is that, a network engineer should understand this. If you're going all the way up to layer 7 and piping your corporate workloads across the public internet, it's not going to work real well. So, set your endpoints to be closest point of presence to your data center. It needs to be express route. Get those things set up, and then have VPN failover. And that goes into my next step, is make sure that you design in. And this is what a lot of customers forget. The cloud is not infallible.
That's good.
We've had that here in South Central U.S., where I'm from, and every single one of my customers was impacted by the South Central outage last year. It was horrible. And then they say, well, go talk to all your customers, make sure that they're following our best practices. Okay, none of them were. Why? Because they thought the cloud was infallible. What do you mean an ad region could go down?
Yeah, it's magical. Why should it go?
It's not supposed to happen, and we're very sorry that it did, but
it
did. So you need to approach your networking and your orientation of your DR and BC that you're going to have an outage, and it's easy to recover if you plan ahead. Do those things first. And then that last step is, I take a very dim view of people that don't record the auditing traffic and the monitoring traffic. It's not that we want to record everything and then try to sift through it. You get all of that stuff in one place and let our machine learning algorithms help you see what's interesting and odd and quirky. And that's what Log Analytics does. That's what Azure Security Center does. I have seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen, do you know that with Azure Security Center, we will analyze your blue screens of death before you even know that you had a blue screen of death, and can point out if you've been breached? Like, that just happens.
I've heard magical rumors of that. Yes.
You don't need to be an expert in looking at kernel memory dumps.
Right. That's all fine and good, and WinDebug is awesome and fun to play with, but do that for you. So that kind of stuff it needs to happen. So governance, subscription management, the whole have a plan, orient your network properly, and then make sure that your monitoring and your auditing is leveraging the modern tools that are there for you. Yes, they cost money. Microsoft is a company in the business of making money, but the barrier to entry is you check the box, and you've covered a whole breadth of things that you used to have to do manually.
Or buy lots of products to do, or what have you. Yeah. So clicking down into that a little bit, like thinking, so you have subscriptions, and let's control access to those subscriptions. So, subscription has resource groups being containers that customers can employ stuff into. In those resource groups have permissions such as contributor, owner, or reader access. Like what would be your approach to a regulated company that has production assets? Thinking about that two subscription approach. They have production assets, some dev assets. They want to create a playground sandbox. Like what would be like a recommendation or tools or features, capabilities that they could use to try to minimize the amount of effort they have to apply, and then also to make sure that things are secure as possible. 4
stages.
Okay.
The playground, the sandbox. Let's go learn how to tinker with things.
Sure.
We used to call them MSDN subscriptions. I think they're just now called Visual Studio subscriptions.
Okay.
Every person that's going to touch Azure should have their own MSDN. Here's $100 of credit every month to go play in. You don't connect it to your corporate network. By policy, you forbid anyone from putting corporate data in it. It is for you to go play.
Yeah.
Step 2, your non-production subscription. It is governed. It is attached to your corporate network. You may give the developers contributor rights to resource groups that get created to iterate and develop. But the purpose of that is you're in the portal, you're seeing how you're doing things, but you're using your developer skills to craft the infrastructure as code, the templates, the ARM templates, the CI/CD pipelines, so that when you get to the next iteration, which for some people is stage or int or QA or whatever, now you only have read-only access to those resource groups. You're still in the non-prod subscription, but now you only have read-only access to see what is happening when you deploy your scripts and your CI/CD stuff. This is not hard. We make it YAML looks scary, and I personally think that YAML is an abomination, but like,
you're an infrastructure guy.
Developers
are
easy.
Spacing.
Yeah.
Give me a semicolon. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You're able to validate that your CI/CD runner is working, and then when you get to pre-prod or right before production, you don't see anything. It runs, and you may be attaching to App Insights to see, yep, it deployed, it's working, or you may be attaching to Log Analytics to say, this is how it's working, you're doing your load testing. That's all done in the context of your non-prod subscription, and I've seen massive companies doing this. Now, this is not going to apply to the giant blue-themed retailer or the giant Microsoft, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. Those are set into a category on their own. This is for the 98% of everybody else. Now you get to production. Nobody touches production. Like the concept of logging into the portal to a production subscription, I just want to throw spoons at people. They're like, that is all automated.
So Derek, I think you're doing a great job, and I love this. You know, you're preaching my choir. Is organizationally in service roles and stuff like that. What about people? You know, people have a strong place to play in this in their roles. So how do those people play into that? Because you talk about somebody using and I call the Azure portal the engineering portal versus it's not a consumer portal, right? In my mindset of how I like people to look at it is, you know,
way of describing it, yeah.
Yeah, if I'm going to be the business unit, right, and I'm going to develop an application, where's my consumption lie, right? So you have all these environments that we go through and whatever, but the people have different responsibilities. You know, the cloud engineer should have the cloud engineering access to fix things or to develop the services, right? The consumer model. Whereas the consumer, who might be whoever is out on the side of the business, maybe it's truly a real customer, right? Private customer, like a Dropbox, like type of experience, or it's internal, right? They're still a customer, but they're internal to the business
unit, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you look at rectifying that and building that out as part of that governance component?
And then throwing into the mix just a third thing where you have separation of concerns amongst people, where you have individuals that are the network guys that continue to want to do networky things in the cloud, and they want to make sure, you know, that the infrastructure guys don't do anything on the network side.
People like Derek scare me. You know, I don't know if I want a bunch of Derek's running around in my network.
You really don't. You really don't. I'm just going to break stuff. So I take your point, and it's a valid point. The things that I come back on is, number one cannot manage the cloud through a visual portal at scale. It has to be automated. I don't want to take the network engineer out of managing the network stuff. I don't want to take the IT ops guy out of managing the IT ops stuff. Those folks, I believe, should be focused on doing the things that they do in the construct of how do we automate it and then lock it down so that only approved changes are happening. In my mind, that only happens through a CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, that is, to me, you're preaching to the choir. That's a challenging sell sometimes to customers, but But from a security standpoint, if you have one entry point and is not a human being, this actually has access to things like production connection strings. So you have a tool that has the ability in it and only it can go out and actually retrieve secrets that it populates connection string or config files with. You've removed a lot of pathways for data exfiltration because no person has the ability to get to that. So,
and I'm not suggesting that you remove RBAC from all of these roles. What I am suggesting is in the production subscription, the owner role should be the EA account owner, which hopefully is a service account or a quasi-service account, so nobody actually has it. There are no contributor roles except maybe a service account to turn on and activate features, and the reader role at the subscription level is your audit runner, actually go back. The contributor role at the subscription level is your CI/CD service principal.
Okay.
Now, when you get down into the resource groups, the RBAC applies primarily to resource groups. That's where the life cycle of your stuff is. So these people these companies that say, we're going to put an entire application into a single resource group. No, you're not. No. You got a web app and a database. Do they go together in the same resource group? Maybe, until you have another web app need to talk to that first database. Now that database needs to get the heck out of that resource group.
No worry,
You
we
have
read you.
DBAs.
Yeah.
You have DBAs that need contributor access to those database stuff, but they don't need to do anything with the network, and they don't need to do anything with the VMs or the web apps or anything like that. So you have to define both in the context of life cycle, everything that is born, lives, and dies together goes in a resource group. If it doesn't meet all three of those, get it out. It goes elsewhere. I have a company right now, or back when I was in the field, I had a company that does, they will go through hundreds of resource groups every day. Everything is at the end of a Terraform pipeline. Now that's nirvana.
Yeah.
Nobody's, not a lot of people can get to that point, but they've gone to the extent that nobody touches the portal. Well, I'm more of a pragmatic, realistic kind of guy, but that being able to see things in the portal, reader, like the network guys should be able to see the network things. They have no business seeing the SQL servers.
Yeah, that's important. So I guess I'm curious as to then, people look for KPIs of success, right? So when they're talking, and this is in a lot of ways, this is a framework, it's a model, right? That has tactical elements to it. But at some point people go, when do I achieve a level of success? And not to say that we're stopping, but it's just that we know we're moving in the right direction, we're achieving things. And, you've got these extremes, right? Those that aren't and those that are, that's all they do. But then there's this big fat middle, right?
Yeah.
The happy medium between what I pontificate on and just the wild, wild west is when a new employee can come in, knock something over, and nothing goes down.
Ooh.
That's where I say, if you can be aware of what is happening to the extent that if the new employee breaks something, but nothing actually goes down, that's where you want to get to. To me, that's the happy medium.
I had a interesting customer request that has a very heavily outsourced IT organization and desires those individuals operating an environment to not have delete privileges on resources when they create them.
Okay.
So they have to go to a different team to delete them just so there can't be any accidental deletions. I think that's kind of an interesting...
That's an interesting approach. You probably get some compliance points for that.
Yeah, but see, I think that also then speaks to the opposite then of models that then are extreme bad ideas, right? It's like, if you spend 60% of your time creating metrics for something, you've missed the idea what a metric is used for, right?
Right.
Or so and so on. Take whatever analogy you want and whatever framework you want, and you can go to an extreme that is not of value anymore.
Right.
And think those examples overshadow a lot of the points that you're making. So how do you have a stronger voice in saying, don't do these things, these pitfalls, entrapments of, you can only create but you can't delete, but you can only delete but you can't create, and then you have all this red tape, this process that's inefficient, right?
And you need like 15 people to get anything done. Yeah.
You want to take people off the bandwagon quickly. That would be it, right?
Yeah.
That would be it. Yeah, and we all, I mean, when the CSAs, we all have our definitely do not do these things. Like I would never let a customer go deploy an app facing the web without having DDoS in front of it. That's just stupid. Yes, it costs money to protect yourself against DDoS. And yes, your app gets accessed, but if that app goes down, how big a trouble are you in? For some people, none. It's not that important of an app. But if it's your lifeblood, you don't put DDoS in front of it, I'm not blessing it.
Yeah. Good point.
So we all have those red lines that we say, no, do not do that. And that's just part of knowing the platform and trusting your CSAs to help guide you. And on the CSA side, we have to be pragmatic enough to know that if you're going to advocate for something that costs money, you have to, understand the context or the background of the customer. Like, I can't advocate for something that costs $5,000 a month if their total spend is $4,000 a month. Like, that's just stupid.
Fair enough, yeah.
But at the same time, if their total spend is $4,000 a month, and if it goes down, property and life are at risk, maybe you should spend $9,000 a month.
Yep, definitely a good point. Now, I got another thing I want you to talk about. So we talked about people, we've talked about a lot of processes and stuff like that. What about the culture? So when you're dealing with frameworks, models like this, you have you pry it out of my cold dead fingers, I'm never giving it up. You've got your cheerleaders, and then you've got this 80% of your base that's kind of like, I guess if I have to, right? How do you deal with the culture of these governance kind of frameworks and stuff like this, and these processes you're talking about?
The best thing that I have learned over my years working with mid-sized companies, it doesn't really apply to the little companies, because really it's one guy or gal is going to say yes or no. With these mid-sized companies and even into the larger enterprises, the very first person I go to make friends with, the owner of security and the owner of the network, because they will put the kibosh on anything. And the way they do it is they put the fear of a breach in the mind of the guy writing the check.
Now, but does that not then come back sometimes and bite you, because the risk aversion, right? Even though it may be quantifiable, right? It's real, but the reality of, right, there's all this others, like, what are the different pieces that for that to actually happen are so slim that the risk is really not that big, right? Yeah,
there's some FUD to it that you have to understand the people. You have to be empathetic. When I actually did a small class for the internal CSA community and the TSPs on empathy, understanding, and it wasn't so much the fluffy stuff. It was, you have to understand where these folks are coming from. They've been burned. They've been bitten. They put the entire weight of the company's success on a networking guy.
In a piece of equipment sitting in front of their circuit to the outside world.
Put a boat
You're right. You're right.
It's this one person or this one team. And so my approach has always been, go and become best friends with those two folks or those two teams, because if you can address their concerns, everything else gets out of the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you get a great point there. Is like they put that responsibility on their shoulders, and a lot of times people are like, "Well, if I mess this up, I lose my job." Right? Yeah. And so frank, and it's not often realistic unless it's the one guy. But at the same time, people make mistakes, and that's where I think your point earlier on is remove the ability for human mistakes to become part of your processes and whatnot.
Right. And mistakes are always going to happen if you remove them to the point where you still have the flexibility of human interaction, of course, but you want to automate as much as humanly possible because that certainly will reduce mistakes. But then to be able to observe deviations from your baseline using our auditing and security tools. This is not going the way it was yesterday. Why? Well, instead of sifting through terabytes of logs, Azure Security Center said that there's a new CVE out and we just got breached in this manner, and click here and we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a lot of empathy for the folks and where they're coming from. Otherwise, you can talk until you're blue in the face and the security guy's going to say, nope.
I feel like there's some psychology to this discussion at some point.
It's all psychology. Yeah. It's all psychology. And it's not that you're trying to manipulate these folks. It's the opposite. You have to put yourself in their shoes.
Well, I think that's it. That's where it's not to warfare with the customer. It's you yourself and reflecting on where my bias is putting them. How am I treating them? How am I engaging them? How am I teaching them? Right. So
the architect have to become their advocate. Mm-hmm. The business unit is what is pushing for this. Otherwise, you end up with what do they call it? Shadow IT.
No. Yeah. Rogue IT.
Well, that never happens.
Whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Because the business is going to accomplish whatever they need to accomplish.
Right.
It doesn't matter how many, whatever, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you have to be their advocate for making sure that, you want to move fast, we can help you move fast, but you got to walk before you can run. Here are some guardrails. Here are some things that we can do. Don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, but at the same time, you're going to have to modernize some of your processes or you're just perpetuating the problems of on-prem.
Yeah. Unless it's Ryan's babies, then throw it out. Throw
the babies out.
Throw it out.
I've got 6 babies at my house, and
if it's Ryan's, I said if it's Ryan's, I'm qualifying that right now. If it's Ryan's baby,
oh boy, yeah. Well, I'm not a network guy, so maybe you would want to do that. So.
I told you.
Yeah. We're a special.
My policy, I just make stuff wide open. Just DMZ it.
A lot more flexible.
Everything.
Any wild card. We're done.
So much more flexible.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just get stuff done. So we talked a little bit about roles, but now like what other capabilities in Azure? I know we mentioned a couple already, like Security Center. You mentioned policies and blueprints. Like, how could a customer employ those to be able to help them with some of this?
Microsoft gets a kind of a bad rap for having a solution to every problem, and sometimes solutions to problems that don't exist. In fact, we have a couple of products in Azure that I'm not sure what it does, but damn it looks good for marketing.
Hey, Ryan, I'm so glad we never show this to the PG, ever.
Well, I'm not calling out any specific features.
I heard somebody start crying just now.
I had a customer tell me the other day that Azure could make diamonds.
Diamonds?
Yeah.
Show me.
Yeah. Diamond mines using Azure, I'm sure.
I think at the very base level, it should not be on any customer's mind that they should do this on their own. Like, we have all the docs that you can possibly shake a stick at. They're published on GitHub. You can all go in and make changes to or propose changes to them. It's all right there for you. In fact, a lot of what we're developing is being developed in GitHub. AKS is a great example. That said, any organization that is actually serious about moving to the cloud should avail themselves of you guys. Well, not specifically you guys, but your peers. Yeah.
Maybe Matthew, but
good job, Bucket.
Yeah.
They should avail themselves of the opportunity to talk to people within Microsoft. That's our entire job. We get paid to know not only what was it designed to do, but what can it do. We get paid to know how do you connect an NSG to an ASG to a firewall to a DDoS to a VNet to a bleh. We know how to do those things. Organizations that try to do it themselves, if they're serious about it, it's going to come back and bite them. Do we deserve some of fault for making it overly complex? Not really, because the cloud is complex. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think though too, an earlier statement you made was, to the extremes we can in our own ways make it too complex, right?
Sure.
So
We do. I would love for all of the different networking features to be just one big basket of networking. But in reality, that's just not how the cloud cadence works.
Yeah.
And if you can explain that, and sometimes it's hard, but if you can explain the concept of resource providers and how they are aligned to specific programming teams and how each of those programming teams does their thing and then you get an appreciation at least. But specific to your question, Ryan, about what kinds of tools can you actually use? Number one, the best tool is you guys talking to your CSAs about what is it.
We didn't pay to say that, by the way.
That I'm trying to
say, is there whiskey involved in this?
Especially if there's whiskey involved.
Oh, yeah.
My customers, you will get me I will show up to any meeting that involves either A, beer, or B, cookies, depending on what time of day it is.
All right. All right.
But more specific to the actual tools, I mean, certainly Azure Blueprints is probably the most underappreciated thing. It's literally, I need to be ISO 27001 qualified. Click, off it goes. Now you can get, and this is one thing that I'm hopeful that Blueprints continues to improve upon. You pull the veneer off that, and it's thousands and thousands of settings that get applied, and you can go tweak every single one of them.
Yeah.
That's great. You've got a lot of flexibility, but sometimes somebody just wants, I need PCI. Cool. Apply the PCI blueprint and you're off and running. So I would strongly suggest starting with that, but don't apply them blindly. You need to know what these things are going to do to your environment, because you apply
they enable
PCI,
stuff.
all of a sudden you can't remote into your VMs. Dang, why can't I remote into my VMs?
Yeah.
Because you can't for PCI, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and just for anybody who doesn't know what a blueprint is, it's a collection of permissions or assets that you want to deploy in a consistent manner to subscriptions. When you are ready to grow up and go beyond, the two that Derek has suggested, to add, specific elements to your subscription every time you create one, and also to apply policies, which we hadn't, which I know you had mentioned, but that's kind of
and those policies control what you can and can't do, but they also, something that most people don't think about, they also apply, where does the audit trail get recorded? I need to bring in all the audit logs. I need to bring in all the, we call them the activity log, the management plane stuff. That's how you're going to find out if you're aligned to baseline or drifting and all of that stuff. So you need to be good at doing those things.
Yeah. So another cloud competitor of ours has the ability, according to a customer, I actually hadn't explored and tried this, but when you go in the portal, you can actually select a drop down saying, okay, I'm going to go in as the reader right now, but I'm going to flip myself to super God mode and start doing some real things. And they thought that was beneficial. Yeah. So you just mentioned something that I think is extraordinarily important, that is the auditing aspect of it. If you can, what if you change yourself to super God mode and accidentally click the delete button on a resource and forget that that magical drop down didn't change your context to something less. And that's where I think things that we have like privilege identity management.
That's where I was going. Yep.
Yeah, to say I need to be God mode, and then have that be an audited thing that actually gets recorded somewhere, saying, Derek requested God mode at this time, and for this period of time, right. and then you have record of what you did when you were that. So,
yeah, and certainly our brethren cloud providers have something resembling that. However, it's one of those things that we really can hang our hat on. If you look at the total corpus and the total amount of experience that we have in doing identity, role-based access control, authorization, and authentication, like why on earth you would attach, and this isn't a knock on the third parties, but we can cover all of it in spades, and it's fewer moving parts. And so I agree with you. Definitely, the ability to elevate yourself just by clicking a little drop-down box, that's not a good idea.
I'm glad you agree. That was my first reaction as well.
PIM is a better way to go, and I'm sure that our brethren clouds have something along those lines, but it shouldn't be that, I need to elevate myself to get a job done. Well, you're doing it wrong. Let's talk about what do you need so that you don't have to elevate yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. So Derek, thank you very much for coming on. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts or things you want to leave our customers with, but definitely enjoyed chatting with you. You know, as boring as governance is, this is a demo-less session, but I think that we actually covered a lot of ground and highlighted.
Did I make you a believer, Puckett?
Puckett and Barry, 2 thumbs up.
No, the only thing
I got to go turn off the port forwarding from 0 to 1024 and all my VMs.
Yeah, you need to turn that off. Now, the only thing I would leave you guys with leave your customers with or your viewers with is take advantage of the CSAs and the TSPs and the global black belts that are out there. They're free resources to you. Take advantage of the Azure Architecture Center, which is out on our docs website, the team that I'm on. It shows you not just how you can be successful, it shows you what we suggest you do to be successful. Not just a path, but a golden path. And make sure when you're going out into the cloud, make sure you have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, come up with a plan.
Good advice. That is
walk out right now.
All right. Thank you again, and definitely, we'll look forward to maybe having you back again and talking about some of your cool architecture.
And I'll do a demo next time, I promise.
Don't tease me.
No, it wasn't a knock. Like I said, it was a good conversation. So.
Yes, great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.